So today I'll start with like brief introduction about what is testing and how does testing happen in IT and overall project introduction. Okay. So generally in IT what happens is, for example, take any customer. For suppose if you are the customer and you want one of the app to be built. So as a outsider, I don't know anything about what is software and what are the technologies used in it. I don't know anything about it. But as a customer, I'll approach an IT company that I need an app to sell my products. So then what IT company will do? They want to understand the customer requirements. So whenever a customer comes and if he is explaining about his requirements, there should be a person who is capable of understanding those requirements and who are able to turn it out into technical knowledge. So in IT industry we have a person called as business analyst. So this business analyst person, what he will do, he will try to gain the requirements from the customer, and this person will have good communication skills. He will have both technical knowledge as well as communication skills based and the knowledge required to understand the customer's requirement. So for example, like for insurance company, to understand insurance requirements you need the person who is having knowledge on that. For Amazon or Flipkart, like those e-commerce websites, you need knowledge on e-commerce domain. So based on the domain, there will be a person called as business analyst from which you'll gain your requirements. Okay. If you are not understanding at any moment, just stop me. Huh? Or if I'm going faster, then also you can stop me in between so that I'll slow down. So after the requirements have been received by this business analyst, he will analyze those requirements and he'll prepare a document. That document is called as business requirement document. This is also called as functional requirement document. Okay. So what does this document consist of? It contains the detailed information like what a customer wants to see on his app. For example, it will be written like, as a user, I want to see a login screen which has username, password, and submit button. So in this minute details also will be given by the business analyst. Based on this document, based on this business requirement document or based on this functional requirement document, the developers start developing their code to build the application, whereas we testers, what we will do is we will identify these requirements and we'll try to build the possible test cases to test that. So for example, without any knowledge on testing also, if I give you one application, if I ask you to test the Facebook login, can any one of you tell like what are the scenarios that you will test to validate whether it is working fine or not? You don't need any testing knowledge, and just as you use Facebook or Instagram daily, just tell me the basic scenarios that what you will try to do in order to identify the mistakes in it. Yeah, in login. Mm, 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 and first we have to focus mainly on the functional part, like what is the login functionality. Upon giving valid username and valid password, then only you should be able to log in into the application successfully. If you are giving invalid password, then you should not be able to log into the application. And if the username is wrong, you should not be notified, because some other people, if you are notified that if this is the right username, then the person will find out your username and he'll try to inject some passwords in it and he'll try to hack your account. So the username, what is even though if you have given wrong user id, it should not give you any message saying that this is the wrong user id, please enter this for the correct one. And the error messages should be meaningful, like Even if a layman is trying to use that application, he should be able to understand that there is a mistake in the password or the email. And then comes the aesthetic parts and the case sensitive parts. Aesthetic looks means like the look and feel of the application, that the basic things like green color is for correct answers, and if there is some error messages and all, that they should be in red color, and the font size should be visible. And it should not be too modern stylish, everyone should be able to read it. Those are the look and feel things that we'll test. So based on whatever the requirements we got, we will try to identify the positive and negative scenarios. First we will test the functional part of that application, and later we will try to do the negative testing on it. Okay. Mm. So once the requirements are understood, then we will start our testing scenario. Then what will happen is, for to do this entire process, there is a terminology in software called as software development life cycle. I'll show you the image and I'll explain you each stage. Uh, mm, mm, mm. So what I said was like, whenever a customer who will approach to any software company, the starting process of an IT project starts from analyzing those requirements to understand what the customer wants to build in the software. So once the requirements are analyzed, then only the developers can start their development and the testers can start their testing. The main thing that needs to be focused on is requirements only, because if I said to build a car, and if the person has built something else which is having four wheels with a lesser quality, that doesn't make any sense. So the requirements needs to be identified very carefully. Okay, that's the main part in IT. So in order to do this entire software product, we are having one life cycle that we will follow, that will start from like planning stage. Okay. Sharda garu అర్థమైందా? Did you understand? Mhm. So that business analyst person is the person who will write that requirement document in a meaningful way which we can understand. It will contain all the detailed steps, like every minute basic steps will be written in that document. So for the software development life cycle, it will start with like planning phase. In the planning phase, what we do is like they will plan like how many developers do you need, how many testers do you need, which company are you going to approach, and how much amount, what is the budget and all, and the timeline, after how many days do you need that project. All that will be done in the planning session. Once the planning is done, then we have the analysis session where we analyze those requirements, and the business talks will happen between the business analyst, customer, and the stakeholders. The term you have to remember is stakeholders. Stakeholders means the persons who are involved in building this project. It might be the customer, developer, business analyst, quality analyst, that is we. So all these people together, they are termed as stakeholders. Okay. So in analysis, after analyzing the requirements, what they do is the developers start designing their structure, their architecture of the program, how they want to build the project, and what are the steps involved in it. And the testers will try to design their test cases. They'll try to prepare their positive and negative scenarios. That will happen in the design stage. In the implementation part, the developers will develop the application, and then they will, once the development is completed, then they will move it into the testing part. In the testing part, what we do is, based on the requirements that we have analyzed and the test cases that we have written previously, based on that we will execute those test cases. For suppose in login case, if we have written the test scenario like validate the user login with valid username and password, That is the test case that we have designed for login scenario. Then in the testing phase, you will just execute it by giving valid username and valid password, and you will check whether the user was able to log in successfully or not. That you will do in testing. So once after giving sign off, like once we have verified the entire application and we are sure that there is no mistake in the application, then only it will go into the production stage. So we are the people who are guaranteeing the customer that this application is good, this application is fine, and it can go into the market. So our role plays a major importance when compared to all these people, because in development one developer will work on login page, the other person will work on add to cart, one person will work on payment information, but the whole application knowledge will be there only with the QA people. And if you do a mistake, it will cost so much to them, because if you are identifying a mistake when it is in live in production, then it causes huge amount of loss to the customer. That should never happen. You should try to identify the defects in the requirement stage or in the design stage or in your testing stage. It should not cross this. Okay, do you have doubts till here? Any doubts? శారద గారు మీకు? So this is the cycle that is left for entire developers, testers together. But for testers specifically, we are having one more cycle called as software testing life cycle. So in software testing life cycle, it is also having separate stages. Like this starts with the requirement analysis. So we are trying to analyze the requirements, as I said before, and then we are having test planning stage. In test planning, what we are trying to plan is we need the deadlines, like when we can complete our testing and what can we test and what we cannot test. There will be some parts of the application which cannot be tested in the test environments, like for suppose if you want to test dynamic OTP with real-time OTP phone number, if your project is not supporting real-time phone numbers in the test environments, you cannot test it until it is live. So we in the test planning stage, you will try to identify what can you test, what you cannot test, how many people do you need to test, and what is the deadline between which we will be completing this testing. And once this is done, then we will start the test case development. So I'll give you in the further classes, I'll teach you like how to design a test case and what are the test case design techniques. But for now, remember that the test case means it's just a thing that you are trying to validate on the application given to you based on the requirements that you have received. Based on the requirements, you'll try to develop some positive and negative things to validate it. And it will have a certain format to design, and there are certain techniques that we follow in software to design those test cases that you will come to know. And test environment setup means, like for suppose this you don't need to do in real time, it will be already done by some DevOps team or some other team. But for real time experience, I just want to show you something. See, this is one application. I don't know whether it will work here. If you see this URL, you can find here as QA. Okay, qa.identity.metlife.com. But if I am not giving QA, it will also go to some application. The same application is replicated over here, but the thing is the servers are different where the application is loaded. This application is used by the live users when you're having only the URL. But if you're having some prefixes here like dev or int or QA, those are not in live. This is for our testing purpose, development purpose. The code is deployed on different servers. As the QA people, we will test our application on QA environment. So when you are once in the job, and if someone asks you to test in the QA environment, then you have to ask the QA URL. What is the URL for our QA account? Based on that URL, you have to hit the application and then you need to test. And there are like two to three types of applications. If you open any application in the browser, like in the Chrome or Edge or Firefox, it is called as web based application. And if you are opening it in your mobile by installing any app, it is apps. And if you are trying to install in your local system, these are called as desktop based applications. So our experience as Selenium testers, we are mainly focusing on web based applications. We will work on the web applications which can be opened in a browser. Okay. Did you guys understood till here? Mm. So once all this environment is setup is completed, and if the test case design is completed, and if the developers gave you the code to test, then you will start your test case execution. Whatever the test cases you have designed, you will just execute them in this stage. And once it's done, like if you have identified the defects, and the developers have given the fixes to it, like you have identified a mistake in the application and you have reported it to developer, and if the developer fixes that, and again what you have to do, like you have identified a mistake, you have reported to someone, and someone said that it was working fine, it is working fine now, then what you have to do? Retest the defect. So there are two important words in testing. One is retesting and the other one is regression testing. Yeah. So in retesting means, once you have, after identifying a defect, and if you have reported to the developer and that defect is fixed and it came back to you, to verify whether it is working fine or not after fixing it, that is called as retesting. So you can mention it like, after fixing the defect, if you verify it whether it is working fine or not, that is called as retesting. But for suppose you have raised one defect, and the developer gave the fix and you retested it, and you found that it is working fine now, there is no defect in the application, and the application is, that defect is working fine now. But while changing the code, while he was trying to fix this defect, there might be chances that he might have made mistake somewhere else in the code, other than while fixing this, he not knowingly, but knowingly or unknowingly, he had made a mistake while fixing this defect. In order to make sure that, like, no other functionality or no other part of the application was broken due to fixing of this defect, what you do is you perform the regression testing. These two terminologies are very important, just remember that. Retesting means verifying the defect after the defect fix given by the developer, whereas regression testing means verifying the scenarios which are related to the defect. For example, like for suppose you have raised a defect for sign up, like when you are trying to first time register it to the application, you have found some mistake, that the email functionality, without giving the at the rate also, the user was able to register successfully with the invalid email, but the developer verified and he has given a fix for the email functionality. But now if you are not verifying the other fields like name of mobile number, date of birth, if you are not verifying the remaining fields, there might be chances that because of fixing this defect, he might have missed giving the limit to the mobile number, or he has put some extra colon, or some extra moments that he has done, which is causing that application to have a defect. To make sure that, what you have to do while you are testing this email, you should also check the name field, mobile field, and the email field, to make sure that the entire sign up is working fine. That is called as regression testing. Did you understood what is the difference between retesting and regression testing? శారద గారు మీకు అర్థమైందా? అర్థం కాకపోతే ఆపండి, నేను మళ్ళీ చెప్తాను మీకు కావాలంటే తెలుగు. మ్మ్. మ్మ్, 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 మ్మ్. డెవలపర్ ఫిక్స్ చేసింది అది. ఇప్పుడు ఒక మిస్టేక్ మనం కనిపెట్టాం డెవలపర్కి చెప్తే అతను అది ఫిక్స్ చేసేస్తాడు కోడ్, అది మిస్టేక్ ఉందని. మ్మ్. 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 ఆహా! కాదు, కాదు. నేను తెలుగులో ఒకసారి చెప్తా వినండి. ఇప్పుడు ఏమైద్దంటే, ఇప్పుడు ఫర్ సపోజ్ ఒక డెవలపర్ మీరు ఇది చూపిస్తాను. ఫేస్‌బుకే చూపిస్తాను. ఇప్పుడు ఫేస్‌బుక్ ఉంది. ఫేస్‌బుక్‌లోని మీరు ఒక డిఫెక్ట్ రైజ్ చేశారు. లైక్ ఈ క్రియేట్ న్యూ అకౌంట్‌లోని మీరిక్కడ చేస్తున్నప్పుడు మీరిక్కడ ఈమెయిల్ అడ్రెస్ ఇన్వాలిడ్ ఇచ్చినా గూడా, లైక్ ఇప్పుడు నేను surekha@gmail.com అని ఇచ్చేసినా గూడా, ఇది సైన్ అప్ క్లిక్ చేస్తే రిజిస్టర్ అయిపోతుంది. కానీ అసలు అలా రిజిస్టర్ అవ్వకూడదు కదా! బికాజ్ దానికి ఉండాలి మధ్యలో. సో మీరు ఈ మిస్టేక్ కనిపెట్టి మీరు డెవలపర్కి రిపోర్ట్ చేశారు, లైక్ ఇది సరిగ్గా పనిచేయట్లేదు, ఈమెయిల్ వ్యాలిడేషన్ జరగట్లేదు అని అనేసి. అప్పుడు డెవలపర్ ఏం చేస్తాడు, ఈ ఈమెయిల్ని ఫిక్స్ చేస్తాడు, లైక్ ఉండే కండిషన్ యాడ్ చేసుకుంటాడు అతని కోడ్లో చెక్ చేసుకోవడానికి. అది ఫిక్స్ చేసి మీకు ఇస్తాడు, నేను ఇప్పుడు ఫిక్స్ చేస్తాను ఒకసారి వెరిఫై చేయండి అని. సో మీరు రైజ్ చేసిన మిస్టేక్నే మీరు వెరిఫై చేస్తున్నారు అనుకోండి, దాన్ని మనం రీటెస్టింగ్ అని అంటాం. అంటే ఇప్పుడు మళ్ళీ మీ దగ్గరికి వచ్చినప్పుడు మీరు ఏం చేస్తారంటే, ఈసారి మళ్ళీ ఇలానే ఇస్తారు, ఇచ్చి సైన్ అప్ కొడతారు. ఇచ్చినప్పుడు అది సక్సెస్ఫుల్గా రిజిస్టర్ అవ్వట్లేదు అనుకో, బాగానే పనిచేస్తుంది. ఎర్రర్ మెసేజ్ చూపించట్లేదు అనుకో, ఇన్వాలిడ్ ఈమెయిల్ అని, మళ్ళీ సరిగ్గా పని చేయట్లేదు అని. ఇది రీటెస్టింగ్. మీరు ఆల్రెడీ డిఫెక్ట్ రేస్ చేసేసాము, వాడు ఫిక్స్ చేసేసి మనకి ఇచ్చేసిన తర్వాత కూడా మనం వెరిఫై చేసినప్పుడు ఉందా లేదా అని చెక్ చేస్తాం, మిస్టేక్ ఉందా లేదా అని. అదే రిగ్రెషన్ టెస్టింగ్ అంటే, ఇప్పుడు ఇది జీమెయిల్ ఇది ఫిక్స్ చేసేసాడు, కానీ ఇందులో ఫోన్ నెంబర్ కూడా ఉంది కదా. ఇప్పుడు ఇందులో మొబైల్ నెంబర్ ఆర్ ఈమెయిల్ అడ్రస్ ఏదైనా ఇవ్వచ్చు. కానీ మన మొబైల్ నెంబర్ లిమిట్ ఎంత, ఓన్లీ 10 డిజిట్స్ కదా, 10 or 11 బేస్డ్ ఆన్ కంట్రీ. ఇప్పుడు ఆ 10 డిజిట్స్ కన్నా ఎక్కువ ఉందనుకోండి, ఫర్ సపోజ్ 11 నెంబర్స్ 12 నెంబర్స్ ఇచ్చే వ్యాలిడేషన్ ఫెయిల్ అవుతుంది అనుకోండి, మనకి తెలీదు, వాడు అది కావాలని చేయలేదు, ఈ ఈమెయిల్ అడ్రస్ ఫిక్స్ చేసేటప్పుడు బై మిస్టేక్ అది జరిగిపోయింది అలాగా. అది జరిగిందా లేదా మనకు తెలీదు, కానీ మనం మేక్ ష్యూర్ చేసుకోవాలి కదా, ఇవాళ ఇది ఫిక్స్ అయిపోతే ఇంకెక్కడ పాడవదు అనేది గ్యారంటీ లేదు, పాడయ్యే ఛాన్సెస్ ఉంది. సో ఛాన్స్ ఉన్నప్పుడు మనం ఏం చేస్తామంటే మొత్తం వెరిఫై చేసుకుంటాం, మీ దగ్గర ఉన్నాయి అన్నీ బాగానే పనిచేస్తుందా లేదా అని. అర్థమైందా? ఇప్పుడు ఒకసారి మీరు చెప్పండి, నేను అప్పుడు కరెక్ట్ చెప్తున్నాను లేదు చూస్తా. ఫస్ట్ రీటెస్టింగ్ చెప్పండి, అప్పుడు మనం మ్మ్, 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 వర్క్ అవుతుందా లేదా చెక్ చేయడం రీటెస్టింగ్. అదే రీటెస్టింగ్ తర్వాత, ఇప్పుడు ఈ డిఫెక్ట్ రీటెస్ట్ అయిపోయిన తర్వాత వేరే ఫంక్షనాలిటీ, సరౌండింగ్ ఫంక్షనాలిటీ ఏమీ పాడవలేదు కదా అనే విషయాన్ని మనం వెరిఫై చేసుకోవడం. ఏమని వస్తే మళ్ళీ మనం డిఫెక్ట్ రేజ్ చేస్తాము. మ్మ్. మ్మ్. అంతే, ఇప్పుడు మళ్ళీ మనం డిఫెక్ట్ రేజ్ చేస్తాం, మళ్ళీ ఫిక్స్ చేసి ఇస్తాడు, మళ్ళీ మనము దాన్ని వెరిఫై చేస్తాము. ఇది కంటిన్యూస్ సైకిల్ ఉంటుంది అనమాట, అది మొత్తం డిఫెక్ట్స్ అన్నీ పోయే వరకు మనం డిఫెక్ట్స్ పంపిస్తూనే ఉంటాం డెవలపర్కి, మిస్టేక్స్ కనిపెట్టి. ఓకేనా? సో Nausheen, are you fine with that? Yeah, yeah, okay. Okay, so now I'll show you something called, okay, I'm here, right? So this test closure is there, no? So in this test closure stage, you will make sure that there are no defects in the application, and you will submit all your defect reports, whatever defects you have identified, and the evidences. See, for the developer, when he is building an application, whatever the application he is building, that is the proof that he has worked, he has built something. But for testers, what is the guarantee that you have verified this application? for to make sure. Yeah. So in this test cycle closure, we need to submit some documents to the client and to our managers. So those documents will include like, for suppose if the developer is building some application, he is having proof that he has worked by showing this application structure, what he has designed, whatever functionality he has done. But as a tester, to prove whether you are worth or not, whether you have done the work correctly or not, it depends upon number of defects that you have raised and the evidences that you capture while testing. So even if it is a positive or negative scenario, irrespective of that, you need to capture the screenshots for everything. Because now you will come and tell me, as a tester, you will come and tell me that this login functionality is not working. Then what I will do, with you have just told me orally, you did not take any screenshot, but I am the developer, I know how to fix this code. What I'll do, I'll just fix the code and I'll redeploy it. You will not even know that I have made a change. Again, I'll just mark the defect as invalid. Whatever the defect that you have told me, after that, after some time, if you have raised any defect, the same defect, I'll just mark it as invalid. It is working fine, please go and check. Our worth of the tester will depend upon how many valid mistakes that you have raised, valid defects that you have raised. That only will count as whether we are a good tester or we are a bad tester. So as a proof, every time you need to capture the screenshot along with the timestamp. Okay, the timestamp is important, and the entire URL and whatever the functionality you have tested, you definitely need to capture the screenshot. That is the basics of testing. Okay, so you in the test closure stage, you will give all those screenshots, the defect reports and the test cases, whatever you have executed, the entire documentation will be submitted. This is STLC. It stands from requirement analysis, where we analyze the requirements. In the test planning, you'll allocate those resources, and you'll discuss about the timeline, about the scope of the testing, and our strategy of testing. What is the strategy that we are trying to use to identify more defects. And in the test case stage, you will develop the test cases based on your requirements. And in the environment setup, nothing you have to do. It depends upon project to project. But for us, we don't need to set up any environment. And for the test case execution, you need to just execute those previous test cases, and you have to identify defects. And once everything is working fine, once you have completely verified the application, then you come to the test closure. Okay. So while doing this, you will try to identify the defects. No? So for raising the defects to the developer, you will have something called as defect lifecycle. So today I'll discuss about only these 3 cycles, so that it won't be a over knowledge to you on the same day. Remember that we have discussed about software development lifecycle, which is like entire project cycle that we follow. And then we have software testing lifecycle, which is extremely followed by our testers. And this comes the defect lifecycle. So whenever you have identified a defect, you will raise it in one application. Okay, I'll show you those applications later, but just remember that whenever you found a defect, you will report it to the developer. So whenever you are opening it, it will be in new stage. It is a new defect. And once it is assigned to any developer, then it will be in assigned stage. Now what the developer will do, he will open the defect and he will try to understand the defect. While he was trying to understand the defect, he is having multiple options to make to it. Like if some other teammate have reported the same defect before you, then he can mark it as duplicate defect. If it is an invalid defect, if that defect is not valid one whichever you have raised, then he will simply mark it as rejected. The defects raised by us should never go to rejected or duplicate stage. It should be a valid defect that we have raised. And if the defect that you have raised is valid, but the developer is not having enough time to fix it at present, then he will mark it as deferred. This is very important. Remember the term deferred. Deferred means the developer accepts that it is a valid defect, but he is not having enough time to fix it. So he will fix it in the further sprints or like later in the project time. Okay, this not a bug is not necessary. Only these 3 are necessary: duplicate, rejected, and deferred. Not a bug or rejected are same. And once the developer accepts it is a valid defect and he is having time to fix it, he will try to fix the defect and he will move it to fixed stage. So once every day in the morning, what you have to do is, after logging into your application, you have to check whether whether there are any defects that are in ready to test stage. Whether any defects are in retest stage or ready to test stage, you have to verify if there are any defects. If there are those retesting defects available, first you have to re-verify them whether they are working fine or not. If they are working fine, you'll simply close the defect. Otherwise, again you will reopen the defect to the developer to please fix the issue. Okay, అర్థమైందా శారద గారా? హలో ప్రవళి, నీకు అర్థమవుతుందా? మ్మ్. ఇవన్నీ మ్మ్. అదేలే, అర్థమైందా ఇక్కడ వరకు పోనీ అందరికి? डिड यू अंडरस्टूड नौशीन? नौशीन, तुमको हिंदी आता है? आता है. So I'll just give one document today. I'll give some notes. Just go through that notes. So tomorrow you'll try to remember those terms so that the next classes will be easy for you guys. And I'll send this recording also. Listen to it again in your free time. Okay, again tomorrow we'll connect at the same time, because if I say everything today, you guys can't understand. It will be overburden for you all. And now, Sheen, I just wanted to tell you something. For you now, for that experience thing, you can put as a freelance that you have worked as freelancer for the 2 years for some company related to India. And for that, I can provide you the documents and the verification and the references. That's not a problem. It's not going to be issue. I have talked to them. They have done the same thing. Like if they're not working in Ireland, some of the guys, they have just taken some freelancing projects and they have just put in their resume and they have used those references only. Then what I'll do is, like after 3 to 4 days, I'll prepare one resume for you and for Sharda Garu, and then I'll put that. Okay, in that I'll give you the project names and the company names that we can manage about the references and the experience. But we will put 2 years of experience, like 2021 to 2023, that you are working as a QA, but some company related in based on India. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, yeah. No problem. Okay. Yeah, no problem. సరే శారద గారు, రేపు కనెక్ట్ అవుదాం.